Here we go. Yes, fish is on.
You are watching an angler
See it on
playing
the
a good
surface,
carp
aren't
on a water near his home. Nothing new about this, you might be thinking. This might be an ordinary event on many waters up and down the country today, but this is no ordinary angler.
And then the line kept tightening, so I struck.
My name is Jack Simpson. For the last 20 years I've run my own fishing tackle shop and rod building business in Turnford in Hertfordshire. My association with the angler you are watching began back in the mid-70s when he, like many others before and since, started to visit my shop for his fishing tackle requirements. This angler was to stand out from most of the other anglers that frequented the shop at that time because of his single-mindedness and his determination to catch big carp. This, along with his willingness to experiment and to try out and test new ideas, was to lead him to become one of the world's most successful carp anglers. Carp fishing in the early 70s had been moving along slowly and little progress had been made apart from anglers like Jim Gibbinson and Jerry Savage, who had proved that carp could be caught all the year round and didn't in fact hibernate in the winter as many still believed. Then came Fred Wilton's breakthrough into the world of high-protein baits. Fred's ideas were to dramatically change people's thoughts about carp baits. Fred published his findings within the pages of the British Carp Study Group magazine, The Carp, the only publication then that was dedicated solely to that species, at a time when very little was ever written on the subject. It caused a minor sensation. No one had ever thought that carp might like high protein, or to mix eggs with their baits, roll them into little balls, and then to immerse them in boiling water to form a skin. Another word came into the language of the carp angler. Boilies were born. For years, up until the late 60s, very little had changed in the use of baits. It was still common to find anglers fishing with potatoes and balanced and floating crust. The early 70s had seen baits such as sausage meat, cat foods, luncheon meat and trout pellets being used in paste form. These baits were more successful than their predecessors, but they had their problems. Other fish liked them. On some waters it was impossible to put a bait out for more than 5 minutes without it being eaten by hordes of smaller fish, and many hours must have been wasted with bare hooks in the water. Boilies were to change all this. No longer were baits going to be whittled down. Anglers could now sit comfortably behind their rods with the confidence and knowledge that their baits would still be intact until a carp came along. In the early to mid-70s, it was estimated that there were around 5,000 specialist carp anglers in the country. This had risen from around a mere 400 in the late 60s. In some areas, carp were being caught in reasonable numbers by a few, but were still considered by most of the anglers in the country to be too hard to be even considered. Carp was still scarce at that time, with very few waters containing them. Some of the most successful anglers in that period came from the area around Kent, where carp were present in the waters there in greater numbers than anywhere else in the country. Kent contains many gravel pits, and earlier some of the more far-sighted angling clubs had made the decision to stock a number of them with carp. Carp learn fast by their mistakes, and many anglers who had been encouraged by reports of catches and articles in the magazines and papers at the time learned even faster than the carp that they were not going to be easy to catch, and soon drifted disappointed back to fishing for other species. Freelining had been recognised as one of the most successful methods of catching carp, and this had been the method used by most anglers dating back to before the 50s and the late Richard Walker's ideas and exploits on Redmire in the days of the Carp Catchers Club. But freelining wasn't always the answer. With many of the waters being so large, other methods such as link legering were being tried to reach the fish and their feeding grounds. Methods such as twitcher hitting, where the angler sat over his rods and would strike at every move of his indicator, became the in thing for a time. Other things became trendy during this period, like matching rods and reels and the high rod setup, where anglers would have to stand over their rods and strike at the runs. Bottle top indicators and long distance casting using very powerful fast taper rods became the only method considered worthwhile by some. Others painted everything black, including their indicators. Inspired by Fred Wilton's ideas, anglers started taking an interest in all sorts of strange concoctions and additives to make their baits more attractive to the fish. Packets of baby foods and high-protein milk and yeast products were purchased. Chemists were visited to buy anything with a high-protein content. Anglers went to untold lengths to obtain in large quantities products that were not normally on sale to the public, and all sorts of different flavours were added to baits in the hope that they would also attract the carp. It became a very secret world, with nearly every carp angler trying to keep his baits to himself, even if that bait wasn't catching. But still, most of the carp caught were being caught by just a few of the anglers who fished for them. Soon many of the carp anglers had started to make and use boilies. But boilies were different from the traditional paste type baits used previously, and the belief still was that hooks should never be seen, and they would bury them deep inside their baits, making it almost impossible for them to be struck off. Many was the bait that was returned intact on the hook after a run had been missed. In the past it had been the practice to completely hide the hook, or at most to just have the point showing. It was into this period that the angler that we are watching came. In a very short time he and his close friends were catching carp of a calibre that others could only dream of. The angler, of course, is Kevin Maddocks, whose catches over the last 15 years have been so remarkable that his name became one of which every angler had heard, even if he himself had never seen a carp. Two points in particular mystified the many thousands of anglers who read of Kevin's successes: how he could publicly announce his target for the season, usually one considered quite out of reach by most anglers, and yet he would always achieve it. We see him here with his first 30-pounder caught from the Mid-Northants Carp Fishery, a fish caught on a side hook boilie at a time when a 30 was a very rare occurrence and a 20-pounder was sure to make the headlines. Here he displays a winter 2910 caught on a side hook boilie, and in appalling weather conditions when most anglers wouldn't dream of being out. People thought at the time that his fish only came from exclusive waters where only a few could fish, but here he is with a Waveney Valley 26-pounder caught on a yeast-flavoured boilie, just one of the many he took from a water that is open to everyone. We see him here with a splendid 27-pound fish caught from what is considered a very hard water. This leads us onto his announcement that he would catch 20 20s in a season, unheard of in those days when most of us were struggling to catch just one, and yet he achieved it, ending the season with 21 over that weight. All of these fish were caught prior to the days of the hair rig, and 5 of them had been winter fish when big winter fish were very uncommon. Here we see Kevin with the biggest brace of winter carp ever recorded up to that time. These had been caught on side hook birdseed boilies, just to show that there is nothing new about birdseed baits. Kevin was catching on a 50-50 mix of Sluice Minor and Sluice Universal way back in the late 70s. He went on to catch many more fish on this excellent bait. A nice 24-pound early season fish is shown here, just one of the many more he was to take that year. We come now to another announcement that he would catch 3 30s in a season, and of course he did it, starting with a superb 30.5 pounder from Northants. The fish took a single peanut, and Kevin still remembers it as the hardest fighting carp he had ever hooked. The second was from the famous Ashley Lake, where Kevin had to swim out and net it after it became entangled in overhanging branches. The third was another fish from Duncan Kay's fishery, 3 30-pound carp caught at a time when a 30-pounder was very rare. Savay Lake was next on the list, and here we see Kevin with a 30 3/4 pound fish taken from the Alcatraz swim, where he had to make a cast of well over 100 yards across gravel bars to reach the feeding fish. Here we see him on the front page of the Angler's Mail, with an Ashley fish of 38 pound, a record for the water which still stands today. In summer or winter, wherever Kevin fished, be it on large or small, hard or heavily stocked waters, he always seemed to have the uncanny knack of catching the biggest and the most fish that those waters had to offer. But there was more to come. Not only did Kevin's enormous catches continue, but his influence and effect upon carp fishing, not only in this country but in many others, became so strong that it had no parallel in the history of big fish angling, except perhaps the late Richard Walker. During the next few years, Kevin was to be involved in the development of 3 of the most important ideas that would totally revolutionize carp fishing. Ideas that would dramatically change the way the majority of anglers would fish for carp. The first of these, along with myself, was the development and the use of carbon fibre rods. To begin with, most anglers said that the extra expense necessary for the new material was wasted, with many carp rods being in their rest for most of the time. But within 18 months, nearly every carp angler in the country was using them. Why? Because for most types of carp fishing, carbon fibre rods were simply better than glass or cane rods, as Kevin had predicted when he became the first to use them. At this time, 1974, no one had done any design or development work with carbon fibre for specifically designed carp rods. Most manufacturers of carbon blanks thought the market was too small to justify the time and investment. I was using carbon fibre fly rods and was convinced that carp anglers would also see the potential for giving much greater improved performance both in casting and big fish control. I discussed this with Kevin, who was already using our glass fibre carp rods, and he agreed to field test carbon prototypes with the intention of us producing a range of high performance rods to cover the whole spectrum of modern carp fishing applications: margin, multi-range and long-range fishing. Over the next 18 months, he tested various rods of different lengths, tapers and test curves, until we were satisfied we had a basic range of carbon carp rods that were vastly superior to anything then on the market. Many of the processes we used in the manufacture of our rods were secretive and still are today.
Sorry, but there's certain things I can't let you see.
Up to this time, nearly all the glass and cane carp rods had cork handles with 2 sliding reel fittings. We weren't happy with this, as it did not give secure reel holding, which is so important when long-range casting or when playing a large, powerful carp. I decided to strip down a sample American trolling rod handle to utilise a clip-locking fitting which was used as an integral part of a moulded plastic handle. We modified this and were satisfied this was the handle we wanted. It was the first time a Fuji Conospin fitting was used on a carp rod. The rods you see Kevin using here today are the latest 11-foot KM5 dual taper with a 1 3/4 pound test curve designed for margin to middle range fishing up to 85 yards. Next we decided to abandon the use of the heavy steel-framed hard chrome line guides. I felt that the single leg Fuji oxide lined rings being used on American spinning rods were superior, and our field testing proved this to be the case. The Fuji single-legged rings flexed with the rod, and we were impressed by their hard-wearing, low-friction surface, which gave greater casting distances. Kevin was so impressed with the rod's performances and design that he agreed to us manufacturing and marketing the range endorsed with his name. The Kevin Maddocks KM Carbon Carp rods had arrived. Initially there were 3 rods in the range: the 11-foot KM3 CF with 1 1/2 pound test curve designed for margin to 50 yards range fishing, the 11-foot KM1 CF 2 1/4 pound test curve multi-range rod capable of fishing up to 100 yards, and thirdly the 12-foot KM1 dual taper with 2 pound test curve for fishing up to 85 yards. The dual taper concept with its overfit joints gave us much wider design potential over conventional spigots, and our field tests proved it to be up to 4 times stronger than spigots. We were so impressed that we decided to incorporate the overfit dual taper design into our newly designed ultimate long-range rod, the 12 1/2 foot KM Trident, which had a 2 3/4 pound test curve, which could comfortably cast 2 1/2 and 3 ounce leads 130 yards or more. Remember, this was 1977, so that the 12 1/2 foot KM Trident was very revolutionary in its concept and design. Kevin's remarkable catches of big carp on these rods soon established them, and soon every serious carp angler in the country was using KM Carbon Carp rods. Today these rods have been updated and improved to incorporate the latest carbon blank developments. There are also new slim Simlock reel fittings and handles, and of course the very latest line guides. Since their inception in 1974, thousands have been sold to carp anglers all over Europe. Then came the hair rig, an extraordinary new concept developed after many hundreds of hours of testing different types of new rigs at Kevin's house by Kevin and his friend Len Middleton. This rig, the first off-the-hook bait rig, which enticed wary fish into picking up a bait with a hook on it as freely as they sucked in a free offering, so changed carp fishing that many anglers who had almost given up started to get huge catches on waters where before they had failed. And today, only 10 years later, Kevin and Len's hair rig method is still used by millions of anglers all over the world, and for other types of fishing other than carp. And still no articles about his fishing appeared in the angling papers. Most successful carp anglers at the time were very secretive about the reasons for their success. Was Kevin like the others? So secretive that he would never help the angling public towards achieving at least some of the successes they wanted. Well, this wasn't the case. It was exactly the opposite. Kevin had been saving it all up for a book. A book in which he intended to reveal every aspect of the methods and ideas which had brought him such success. In this book there were no secrets. Every rig, every method, every water and every bait was revealed. No secrets were kept, no lies were told. Even every bait recipe he used was to be published in the book. He wanted, he said, to give every carp angler in the country the chance to catch as many big carp as he had done. The writing of this book had been a harder task than Kevin had ever envisaged. Over a period of a year and a half, Kevin was to dedicate all his spare time to unite his and his fishing friends' revolutionary ideas. And so came Kevin's third and biggest achievement, the publication of his book Carp Fever, of which this is the first of the videos.
Absolutely beautiful. What a lovely mirror.
The book contained much totally new material and many new ideas never before published or written about. Let's take a look at them while Kevin goes on doing what he does so well, catching carp. As the angler turns the pages of Carp Fever, our first stop is on page 52. Here Kevin has written about the perfect indication system, at a time when most of us were struggling to keep line from spilling from our spools in conditions of strong wind and drag. We see here on page 96 where Kevin has illustrated the idea of the shock leader for long-range casting, another idea quite new at the time to many readers. Next comes the bolt rig with another type of rod clip, the one mounted on the rod itself. Up to this time, most carp anglers had tried to avoid any resistance to a take-in fish. Kevin's bolt rig method was designed to do exactly the opposite, to cause resistance, so that a fish would bolt and prick itself, making it easier to hook. Fixed leads follow, another method quite new at the time, and then the frightener. Then he writes about balanced baits, after proving in tank tests at his home that all the grains of sweetcorn put into the tank were eaten by the carp except the one with the hook in it. Not because the fish was wary of the hook, but because it could detect the difference in weight. On page 125 comes the hair rig, which I've already mentioned, and this included the use of very small hooks, down even to size 10, quite unheard of for carp fishing in those days. This leads on to Kevin's remarkable winter catches in 1980, 84 doubles including 10 20s in the winter. Page 213 mentions the use of tiger nuts as a bait, something that very few anglers had heard of at the time, and which many believed could never work as they were so hard. Then came much detail on the power gum or elastic rig, different varieties of the hair rig and pop-ups. The winter chapter revealed Kevin's winter successes, even at Redmire, where most members had never bothered to try in the colder months, but where Kevin had many 20s and 2 January 30-pounders. The bait chapter contains more than 60 pages of baits and bait recipes. Nothing like it had ever appeared in print before. Many of those recipes other carp anglers would have kept secret, but in Carp Fever everything was revealed, as Kevin had said it would be, as were the amino acid tests, all very secret, the use of amino acids, until they were listed and tested in Carp Fever, and even liquid baits. It's impossible, said some, but Kevin caught fish on them, so he wrote about them in his book. The chapter on Lake Cassion in France contains much detail of how to fish the water, and it was Kevin, along with Paul Regent of course, who were amongst the first from the UK to fish it. And now the books on video, of which this is only the first part. Thousands of anglers took up carp fishing as a result of carp fever. You might say they caught the fever themselves, and many more books on the subject were published. And with the hair rig making it much easier for all, specialist tackle and bait companies started up all over the place. This became the most progressive period carp angling had ever known, and Kevin, having started it all off and given in carp fever all the help he could to all the carp anglers, just went on fishing and catching carp from many different hard waters. He caught more 30s in a season than anyone had ever done before, and at the end of this period had taken more 20s and 30s than anyone in the country. All these fish were taken from a variety of different waters all over England, and some of them very difficult, like Longfield, better known today as Fox Pool. The School Pool in Kent was another. There were waters in the Midlands, and the famous Ashley of course, along with the notoriously difficult Yateley complex in Surrey. There were also the 3 big fish taken from Longfield, where no one had ever done so well in a single session before, and those remarkable catches have continued right up to the present time. In January 1990, Kevin caught his first English 40-pounder from the Mid-Northants fishery, and followed this up with a 35 from another water a few weeks later. 2 fish weighing over 75 pounds, and in the winter too. Meanwhile, that book went on breaking records too, becoming the world's best-selling specialist angling book, published in 4 languages with 60,000 copies sold, and the English edition reprinted 15 times. The book soon became known as the Carp Fisher's Bible, and everybody taking up carp fishing wanted to see a copy. The methods and tactics were soon adopted by thousands, and carp catches increased nationwide. Carp anglers began to think more about their methods and tactics, which resulted in an explosion of new ideas. British carp anglers took the lead, and now anglers from all over the world look to emulate their methods. We are back watching Kevin enjoying himself catching a small carp on the water near his home, proving that big fish anglers can still enjoy catching smaller fish. To become a successful big carp man, it must be appreciated that one has to serve an apprenticeship by catching many smaller fish. By catching small carp, all the facets of carp fishing can be practiced and perfected before moving on to really big fish. Choosing the right tackle, learning watercraft, thinking carefully about rigs and baits, striking, playing, landing, and of course, carp conservation. Great care must be taken in the handling, weighing, and returning of the fish. All of these things can only be learned by fishing the easy, more heavily stocked waters before moving on to the challenge of big fish. No one can become an instant big carp man, although there are many who have tried and failed. We had of course asked Kevin to try to catch us a big fish for this video, a fish of a lifetime. A fish of a lifetime cannot always be caught to order, but Kevin, always ready to take on our challenge, had opted to fish for 2 days, starting on Duncan Case fishery, followed by 5 days on his own water, Withy Pool, to achieve this.
just about £10.
Withy has the reputation of being a notoriously hard water, but one that contains some very big fish.
They fight well in the water and they're fairly placid on the bank. Nice little fish. Fishy. Lovely little fish. Let's put her back.
For an update on his progress, we now take a short journey to join Kevin on his water, Withy Pool, on the 5th day of his attempt there. I heard the other day that Duncan's Mid-Northants fishery is going to be finished, Kevin, is that right?
Yeah, unfortunately it's true. It's finally come to an end. ARC have bought the land. They're going to redig the field around the lake.
Yeah.
And rework the lake as well eventually. And Duncan's now got to move all the fish.
Oh, that's very sad. It's taken years to build that fishery up, hasn't it?
Yeah, yeah. He about 1970, I think, he started to run it. And I joined it in the mid-70s, as you probably remember.
That's right. You got some good fish out of there, didn't you?
Yeah, I caught my first 30 there, and my first 40, in fact, earlier this year. But yeah, it's a shame. It's taken years to come good, and now all the fish have got to be moved. So it's rather sad, especially for me, because it's been, you could say, one of my stomping grounds, if you like. You know, I've learnt a lot there and experimented a lot. But Duncan's not too upset. He's got a water down the road called Ringsted. Only about 5 minutes down the road by car, so the water quality is about the same.
And he's going to transfer the fish, or as many as he can.
Yeah, he's transferring the fish shortly. By the end of 1990, all the fish will be gone into the new lake. So it's sad in a way.
That's right. Duncan will bounce back, though. He's one of life's fishing characters, isn't he, Duncan?
He certainly is, old Duncan, yeah.
We all know a story about Duncan, don't we?
Yeah.
Plenty of stories about Duncan.
Yeah.
Still, you spent a bit of time there on this video and caught 1 or 2 fish, didn't you?
Yeah, recently we went there and we thought we'd try and get something on film as it's the end. And we spent a couple of days there, 2 days and a night. And it was very, very hot weather. You know, we had some scorching weather recently. And I caught mid-20 and another fish about 19, 20 on the bottom, which was a bit of a struggle, but it was so hot that we decided to give floaters a try. There was a lot of fish in the bay area of the lake, which is the shallow bay. I don't know if you've ever been there, have you?
No, I've never been to Mid-Northants.
The bay's shallow and very weedy, and there's always a lot of carp in the bay, and they were basking in the weed. I put a few floaters out, and odd fish started to take them, and I put a few more out, and gradually they got more and more confident, as usual, you know, on the free offerings. And after a while I decided to have a go, and I set up a Nash controller, and knowing that they're very shy on floaters, I used a very light hook link, 5 or 6 pound hook link, and a small hair rig hook, and I had a go for them. And I had 1 or 2 fish swirl at the floaters. They were taking the free offerings all the time, you know, take every one, leave the hook bait, usual thing. I mean, that's happening with bottom baits all the time, but you don't see it. You don't see it,
that's right.
I think what you see with floaters is what's happening on the bottom, you know. And eventually I had a very good confident take off a fish, and my aim was to keep it on the surface for the whole of the fight if I could, because it was very weedy, and once the fish had got his head in the weed I'd have had problems. So I kept as much pressure on the fish as I dare, as much as the tackle would stand.
Not a lot with 6 pound, I think.
No, plus a very lightweight hook as well, because I was fishing just a single floater, and of course a single one sinks if you use a strong hook, which is normally heavier. And managed to keep it on the surface all the way in, and I got a bit keen at the end. I got a boot full of water.
Again.
I wanted to go towards the fish. I was thinking any minute it might start fighting, you know, but it didn't. It just kept wallowing on the top, and I'll always remember it, not because it was a huge fish, but it's probably going to be my last fish ever from Duncan's, you know. And
Yeah.
it ends a period of perhaps 15 years of fishing there on and off, and it was about 19 pounds.
Well, that's a nice fish to get on a floater, isn't it?
Yeah, dead on 19 I think it was. And yeah, normally the fish you catch there on floaters are small ones, so it'll hold memories for me, that fish, although it wasn't by any means the biggest I've caught there, but certainly a memorable one.
Well, it'd be nice if we could catch one now.
Yeah, there's a good chance. Conditions are nice. Overcast. A little bit of bubbling going on out there at the moment.
That's right, yeah. Do you think they're likely to be carp, or halfway between the trees?
I think they're probably fish of some sort. There's a lot of tension breeding
Yeah, that's
here
right.
as well. I don't think they were bubbling there earlier, so I think there's a chance.
Withy's renowned as being a very, very difficult water, Kevin. I'm surprised that you picked it with only 5 days to get a result.
Yeah, it is very difficult water. It's one of the hardest I've ever fished, although I don't fish it a great deal. We just wanted to demonstrate fishing on a very difficult water, and it seemed an ideal place to do it, you know.
Yeah.
We started in the far corner over there. Initially there was quite a few fish in the area, but soon after starting they moved out, unfortunately, and I stayed there for about a day and a half, and fish started to show about halfway along the lake over the other side there.
But where all those trees are in the water?
Yeah, there's a lot of sunken branches there, and there's always fish underneath.
Yeah.
In amongst the roots of the tree. There's several batches of trees, as you know, all along this bank as well, and
Right.
There's always carp underneath them, and well, catfish as well. They love it under there, and I mean, you always see the big fish in the trees, although I don't think at any one time the whole population's under the trees, but it's tempting to fish up against them. You get twice as many runs, but you lose twice as many fish.
If not more.
Yeah, such swings and roundabouts, really. But yeah, I saw a lot of fish moving elsewhere. Unfortunately, I couldn't fish there really because it was unsuitable for the cameras. So towards the end of the second day, I moved on to the front here. And
Did you catch anything here?
well, initially no. I was fishing up against the branches out here. One very tight to the branches and one just out a bit, and nothing happened initially. On the third day I had a grass carp.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah,
Novelty value?
yeah. Screaming run, thought it was a carp, you know. The rod went over nicely and that, and then it just came in a little bit easier than it should have done, you know.
You realised it wasn't a 30?
Yeah, but, there's a few grass carp in here. It was 8.5 pounds.
Nice fish, that.
Yeah, Yeah, I wasn't disappointed to catch it. It was nice to know that everything worked, you know.
That's right.
And that was all that happened that day. But yesterday, it all came right.
Yeah, I understand you pulled off the big one yesterday.
Yeah, everything went right, and caught one just under 35.
Cracking fish.
Yeah, very, very pleased.
In fact, 35, just under 35, that's got to be the largest British fish that I know of in a video.
Yeah, I think it could well be. It's the largest I've heard of. So,
well pleased with that.
Very, very pleased, yeah. I hope the fish near the trees and stuck into it, and straight away it just kited away from the trees. And
that was a break, wasn't it?
Yeah. These trees along this bank are not as bad as the ones on the other side. A good proportion of the fish you hook here do come away, whereas over the other side there 90% go straight under the trees. And this one just came away and it kited left, and it took some line and it went further across the lake. It went about 3/4 of the way across.
Is there a channel runs through here that it was following, or?
Sort of. Out in the middle here there's a deep bowl, and the first thing it did was go down into the deeper sort of hole, and then it came up the other side taking some line, picking up a bit of weed, and it went about 3/4 of the way across, and it didn't do a lot after that. It just slowly came, took a couple of feet of line and came a bit more, and very slowly working its way back across towards me. And I wasn't giving it a lot of pressure. It had some weed around it. I don't like to do that if something's wrong.
What breaking strain line were you using?
Yeah, I was using 11 Sylcast, and gradually it just came nearer and nearer, and it took quite a few minutes. Eventually, a little bit of a go round by the net, and lovely, just netted it, no problem. Couldn't believe it. Went to lift it out, really heavy.
Has that fish been caught before this?
No, I recognised the fish. It hasn't been out for more than a year.
Really? That's quite a result when you think about it.
Yeah. So we brought it up onto the bank and really pleased, weighed it up. Knew it was a 30 obviously straight away. And yeah, 35.
5 days and the grass carp on a 34.
Yeah.
And a lot of the rods that fish here don't catch anything in a whole year.
That's right. That's the way it goes. And this is our last day today, and I don't really care if I don't catch anything.
Well, the weather's turning a bit cooler now. Perhaps we will have another one.
Yeah, there's a good chance. This is good. It's open up. A little bit of a ripple.
The old grebes are coming over to stir the fish
Yeah,
up.
hark at the little one. It's every time the adult one surfaces, they irrespective of whether it's got a fish in its beak or not, they go mad, don't they, the young ones?
Yeah, it's a roach fly, I suppose, is it? That's a roach fly and breed.
There's a lot of roach fly here at the moment. Yeah.
There goes Mum. Now let us return to the evening of the 4th day to see the landing of Kevin's big withy carp.
Yes, here we go. It's not doing much at the moment, just kiting a little bit. Oh, at last. Let's hope it's a decent one. Get that line out of the way, keep it sunk. Ooh, feel it kicking a bit. Ooh. Oh, I hate that when they turn on the fins. There's quite a lot of weed out there, and I've got a feeling she's got some weed on her. Oh, she's coming in nice and steady. Feels like a good one. Oh, oh dear. Don't like that. Fish is rolling over, or the line's flicking off the fins. Ooh. Certainly feels a good fish. Just keep the steady pressure. Yeah, she's coming in. Feels like a big fish. No long runs, just heavy power. Kiting back to the right now. Good, I'm glad, because there's a bar to my left. Once it goes over that bar, it's in very deep water. Let's let the clutch off a bit as she's coming closer. She's coming in now. Oh, it's coming in a lot easier now. Take it easy. Oh, it's a good fish, good fish. There she comes. Got her! Beautiful. Oh, what a lovely fish, look at that. Yeah! That looks a good fish, that looks a very good fish. Oh yeah, it's definitely a cool. What a cracker. Woohoo. Oh. Fantastic. That's what it's all about. Well worth the wait. That's definitely over 30. Just stay there a minute, my old friend. Lovely. What a beauty. Oh yeah. Lovely. It's about 35. Yeah, I think we'll call that 35.
The final weight of the fish was decided on as 34 pounds 15 ounces after checking the weight of the weigh sling.
What a fantastic fish. It doesn't matter if you wait all season for a fish like that. Oh, lovely, look at that. Smashing. What a fish. Sometimes you're lucky enough to get one or two in a season like this. Sometimes you have to wait a couple of seasons or a lifetime. What a cracker. Look at that. Beautiful. Not a very long fish, very deep bodied. Look at that, what a cracker. What a beauty. 4 or 5 days, who cares? 4 or 5 weeks, who cares? What a beauty. Fish of a lifetime. Magic. Carp fever. Just look at the width across the back. Beautiful fish. Lovely. Right, we better put it back, I think. I think we can risk walking to the water. She's fairly placid. What a beauty. One of the biggest fish in the water. Just hold her for a second. Got me feet wet, who cares? Who cares? What a beauty. I'll just hold her for a minute. Oh, steady on, girl. Don't go just yet. What a cracker. Lovely. Beautiful fish. Just wait till she gets herself together again. I think she wants to go now. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, there she goes. Absolute magic. Magic.